The silence was the first thing Bruce Daly noticed. Not the quiet of his Bellevue Heights mansion, which was normal, but a dead, hollow silence that swallowed sound. He dropped his briefcase on the marble floor, the thud echoing unnaturally. "Marie," he called out, his voice thin. He walked into their master bedroom. The king-sized bed was perfectly made, but something was lying in the center of the pristine white duvet. It was a single, glossy photograph from their last obstetrician visit. The grainy black and white image of their unborn child. A flicker of annoyance, then unease. Taped to the back was a folded note. He picked it up. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a note. It was the ultrasound picture itself, carefully sliced open. A letter hidden inside. The letter was written in Marie's elegant, familiar script. But the words were from a stranger. "Bruce, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't look for me. Don't hire investigators or call the police and pretend to be the grieving husband. We both know what you are, and I can't let our child be born into it. I thought your affair with Chloe was the worst of your betrayals. I was wrong. It was just a symptom of the disease. I know what you did at the company. I know about the Redwood Fund. I know what happened to your father. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about protecting an innocent life from the poison you carry. Consider this my resignation from our marriage and my declaration of war. Every step you take, I'll be 2 ahead. Your world is about to fall apart. It's a shame, really. You could have been a good man, Marie." Bruce read it twice, then a third time. The paper trembled in his hand. Redwood Fund? His father? It was impossible. She couldn't know. It was a bluff, a hysterical pregnant woman's parting shot. He crumpled the letter, his knuckles white. The affair. That he understood. He'd been sloppy with Chloe Vance, a junior VP at his private equity firm, Daily Capital. He had expected tears, screaming matches, divorce lawyers. Not this. Not a vanishing act coupled with a threat that struck at the very foundation of his life. He stormed through the house, a predator in his own empty cage. Her closet was half empty. Sensible shoes, winter coats, the things you wouldn't take for a quick getaway. Her jewelry box was still on the dresser, the diamond necklace he'd bought her for their anniversary glinting mockingly. But her passport was gone, her laptop was gone, and the small antique wooden box where she kept the only photograph of her late parents was also missing. This was calculated, planned. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over his lawyer's name. No. First, Chloe. He needed to know what Marie could have possibly overheard, what she thought she knew. He jabbed the call button, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Bruce?" Chloe's voice was a silky purr, an infuriating sound at this moment. "She's gone," he clipped out, pacing the length of the cavernous living room. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a Seattle skyline, shrouded in mist, mirroring the fog in his own mind. "Gone where? Did you have a fight?" "She left. Vanished. She left a letter, Chloe. She knows about us, and she mentioned the Redwood Fund." Silence on the other end. For the first time, he heard a crack in Chloe's professional composure. "That's not possible," she whispered. "No one knows about that." "It's buried." "Apparently not deep enough," he snarled. "Did you say anything? Did you leave an email open? A document on your desk?" "Of course not. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Her voice regained its edge. "This is your mess, Bruce. You were the one married to her. You were the one who underestimated her. I told you she was smart. He hated when she was right. He had seen Marie as gentle, trusting, an artist who cared more about the hue of a sunset than the complexities of a balance sheet. He had cultivated that image, encouraged her to stay out of his business. He saw her as a beautiful, calming presence in his chaotic life, a prize, a comfort. He had never truly seen her as an equal. Now that deliberate blindness was about to cost him everything. "I'm coming over," he said, grabbing his keys. "Don't go anywhere." He hung up before she could argue. As he walked out, he glanced back at the ultrasound photo, still lying on the bed. A tiny, curled form, a promise of a future that had just been ripped away. For a fleeting second, it wasn't the business or the money he mourned. It was the loss of that image, the perfect family portrait he had been so close to completing. His legacy, a son or daughter to carry the daily name. The anger returned, cold and sharp. She had taken his child. She had declared war. Fine. He was Bruce Daly. He had built an empire from his father's legacy, crushing competitors and bending rules until they snapped. He didn't lose wars. He would find her. He would bring her back. And he would make her regret the day she ever thought she could stand against him. The hollow feeling in his chest was not grief. It was the echo of a collapsing kingdom, and he would do anything to silence it. Chloe Vance lived in a sleek, minimalist condo in South Lake Union, a glass tower that reflected the grey Seattle sky. It was a place paid for by a salary and bonuses that Bruce personally signed off on. When he slammed the door behind him, the sound echoed off the polished concrete floors and stark white walls. Chloe stood by the window, a glass of wine in her hand, looking deceptively calm. She was dressed in tailored slacks and a silk blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, professional knot. She was the opposite of Marie's soft, bohemian warmth. She was steel and ambition. "You look terrible," she said, taking a slow sip. "Save the pleasantries," Bruce snapped, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "What does she know? How could she know?" Chloe turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Let's be logical, Bruce. Marie is not a financial analyst. She wouldn't understand the intricacies of the Redwood Fund. She must have found something tangible, a document, a recording, something you got careless with." His mind raced. He was never careless. Every sensitive file was encrypted, every incriminating conversation held in a secure room. His father had taught him paranoia as a virtue. "There's nothing at home. The office is a fortress." "What about your father's old study? The one you keep locked?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing. "You told me it was full of his old papers. You said you never went in there." He froze. The study. It was his father's sanctuary, left exactly as it was the day he died of a sudden heart attack 5 years ago. Bruce had kept it as a morbid shrine, a place of untouchable legacy. Marie had always respected that. Hadn't she? "She wouldn't," he murmured, but the conviction wasn't there. He remembered a few weeks ago she'd asked for the key. She'd claimed a sentimental old book of her mother's might have been mistakenly stored there during a move. He'd given it to her without a second thought, distracted by a conference call. "Oh, Bruce," Chloe said, a hint of pity in her voice that felt like a razor blade. You handed her the key to the tomb. He sank onto her stiff, modern sofa, the reality of his mistake crashing down on him. His father, Richard Daly, hadn't just been a brilliant investor. He'd been a ruthless one. The Redwood Fund was his masterpiece of deception, a shell fund used to systematically bankrupt smaller, promising tech companies, allowing Daly Capital to acquire their patents and assets for pennies on the dollar. It was illegal, unethical, and the bedrock of their billion-dollar fortune. Bruce had not only continued the scheme, he had perfected it. "If she has proof, real proof," he trailed off. "She'll burn you to the ground," Chloe finished for him. "And me along with you. My name is on the last 3 acquisitions." Her calm finally broke, and she began to pace. This is what I warned you about. Messy personal lives destroy careers. You were supposed to be divorcing her, not letting her get pregnant and play detective in your house. What was I supposed to do? He yelled, jumping to his feet. She was my wife. I wanted a family, a legacy, something real. Was it real, Bruce? Or was she just another asset? The perfect corporate wife to complete the picture? Chloe's words were sharp, striking a nerve he didn't know was exposed. You didn't love her. You curated her. He had no answer for that. He looked at Chloe, at her cold, calculating ambition that so perfectly mirrored his own, and felt a wave of revulsion. She was a partner in crime, not in life. The affair had been a transaction, a thrill, an escape from the quiet goodness of Marie that had started to feel like a judgment. We need a plan, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We report her missing. We paint her as unstable, hormonal, a danger to herself. We use her history. Marie's parents had died in a car crash when she was 19. She had struggled with a bout of severe depression afterward. They had met a year later, when she was fragile, and he was her charismatic savior. He had used that vulnerability to build her dependency on him. Now he would use it to destroy her credibility. Chloe nodded slowly, her mind already working. I'll start scrubbing our internal servers. Any email, any calendar invite, any trace of us outside of work gets wiped. You need to hire a private investigator. A good one. Not to find her, but to control the search. And you need to call your lawyer. Now, she was right. This wasn't about a crumbling marriage anymore. It was about damage control. He pulled out his phone again, his fingers dialing Arthur Vance. No relation to Chloe, but the most ruthless attorney in Seattle. As he listened to the phone ring, he glanced at Chloe. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by a familiar glint, the same one he saw in his own reflection. It was the thrill of a high-stakes game. They were cornered, but they were not defeated. Arthur, he said when the lawyer answered, I have a situation. My wife, Marie, she's missing. He let his voice crack just so, injecting the perfect amount of panic and despair. The performance had begun. Detective Isabella Rossi had a nose for lies. After 15 years with the Seattle PD, she'd learned that truth had a certain plainness, while deceit was always overwrought, garnished with too much emotion or too many details. Bruce Daly's story was a 7-course meal of curated grief. She sat opposite him in his cavernous living room, a space so large and impersonal, it felt more like a hotel lobby than a home. Bruce was flanked by his lawyer, Arthur Jennings, a man whose tailored suit probably cost more than her car. She's been depressed, Detective, Bruce said, his voice thick with practiced sorrow. Deeply. Her pregnancy. It brought up a lot of old trauma about her parents. She wasn't herself. I was worried, but I never imagined she would just run. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. It was a good performance, but Rossi had seen better. Did you have an argument before she left, Mr. Daly? She asked, her pen poised over her notepad. We never fought, Bruce said, looking up, his eyes pleading. I adored her. Line number 1, Rossi thought. No married couple never fought. Her letter mentioned a Chloe, Rossi said, keeping her tone neutral, and something called the Redwood Fund. Can you elaborate on that? Arthur Jennings cleared his throat, a sound like gravel grinding. My client will not be discussing the contents of what is clearly a delusional note written by an unwell woman. Ms. Vance is a respected vice president at Daily Capital. Marie, in her fragile state, had developed an unfounded jealousy. So you are denying an affair? Rossi pressed, looking directly at Bruce. Bruce's jaw tightened. My priority is finding my wife and ensuring the safety of my unborn child. Her paranoid fantasies are irrelevant. Evasion. Not a denial. Rossi made a note. We'll need a list of her friends, family, anyone she might have contacted. She doesn't have much family, Bruce said quietly. Just a cousin in Portland. And her friends? They were my friends, really. We'll give you a list. Another red flag. A woman in her early 30s with no support system of her own? It spoke of isolation, of control. Rossi had seen it before. Powerful men often pruned their wives' lives like bonsai trees, shaping them into something small, beautiful, and entirely dependent. After leaving the mansion, Rossi sat in her unmarked car, watching the rain streak down the windshield. The whole scene felt wrong. The missing wife, the powerful husband, the talk of mental instability. It was a classic playbook. "What have you got, Ben?" she asked her partner, Ben Carter, over the phone. Ran a preliminary background on Daly. He's clean, but his old man, Richard Daly, had some smoke around him. Rumors of aggressive takeovers, ruining people. Nothing ever stuck. I'm digging into Daly Capital's financials, but it's a fortress. Chloe Vance is a shark, top of her class at Wharton, ruthless reputation. As for Marie Bacon, she's practically a ghost. Art degree, a few gallery showings years ago, then nothing after she married Daly. No social media, no credit card activity in the last 48 hours, phone is off. She didn't just disappear, Ben. She was scrubbed. Rossi stared back at the imposing stone facade of the Daly mansion. He didn't just want a wife. He wanted to own her. And when she tried to leave, he branded her as crazy. But that letter, that wasn't the writing of a crazy person. It was a mission statement. Her gut told her Marie Bacon wasn't a victim hiding in a shelter. She was a fugitive with a plan. Rossi's job was to find her, but a deeper instinct told her that Marie didn't want to be found by the police. She was running from her husband, and she was hunting him at the same time. "Keep digging on the Redwood Fund," Rossi ordered. "If it's a fantasy, it shouldn't be hard to disprove. If it's real, then we're not looking for a missing person. We're looking at the motive for a potential homicide." Ben was quiet for a moment. "You think he killed her, is he?" "I think he's capable of anything to protect his empire," Rossi replied. "And I think Marie Bacon knew that. The question is, did she get away in time?" The salt-laced wind of the Oregon coast was a harsh but welcome balm. Marie Bacon stood on the rickety porch of a small rented cottage in Astoria, a town of faded fishing glory and quiet anonymity. She wrapped a thick wool sweater tighter around her growing belly, a protective gesture that had become second nature. The grey expanse of the Columbia River meeting the Pacific was a constant, churning reminder of the turmoil she had left behind. She wasn't the woman Bruce Daly thought he knew. The quiet, gentle artist had been a role she'd played, a refuge she'd taken after her parents' death. Bruce, with his commanding presence and promises of safety, had seemed like a harbour. But a harbour can become a prison. The dependency he'd fostered had felt like love at first, then comfort, then suffocation. The pregnancy had changed everything. It was a fierce, primal awakening. The thought of raising a child in that gilded cage under the shadow of a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes was unbearable. Her suspicion started small. A hushed phone call Bruce took in the garden, an odd tension with Chloe Vance at a company gala. She started listening, not just hearing, and then she'd used the key to his father's study. She hadn't been looking for anything specific. She just wanted a piece of her own past, a book from a box of her things. But she had stumbled upon Richard Daly's real legacy, a set of old, leather-bound ledgers hidden beneath a false bottom in his desk drawer. The ledgers detailed the Redwood Fund. It wasn't just a scheme, It was a sociopathic work of art. Richard, and later Bruce, had targeted family-owned businesses, innovators on the brink of success. They would use shell corporations to short their stock, spread rumors, sabotage supply chains. And then, when the company was bleeding out, Daily Capital would sweep in with a lowball offer, presenting themselves as saviors. They weren't just buying companies, they were destroying lives, families, dreams. One entry, dated a decade ago, detailed the ruin of a small biotech firm. The owner, a man named Marcus Thorne, had died by suicide a month after the takeover. Marie had found the old news clippings tucked into the ledger. He'd left behind a wife and 2 young children, but the final, sickening discovery was about Bruce's own father. Richard Daly hadn't died of a heart attack. The last ledger contained a frantic, final entry in Richard's hand, dated the day before he died. It spoke of a massive miscalculation, an SEC investigation that was about to expose everything. And taped to the inside back cover was a copy of a toxicology report. Richard's blood had contained a lethal dose of a fast-acting, difficult-to-trace beta blocker, one not prescribed to him. Bruce hadn't inherited an empire. He had seized it. He hadn't just continued his father's sins, he had covered them up with the ultimate crime. That was the poison. The rot at the core of the Daly legacy. And she was carrying a Daly heir. From that moment on, every loving touch from Bruce felt like a lie, every smile a mask. The affair with Chloe was no longer a betrayal. It was a footnote. She spent a month planning her escape, a ghost in her own home. She used cash withdrawn slowly over months to buy a used car. She set up a new email under a false name at the public library. She found this cottage on a vacation rental site that didn't require a credit card. She had copied the most incriminating pages from the ledgers with her phone, encrypted them, and stored them on a thumb drive she now wore on a cord around her neck, tucked beneath her sweater. Her letter was the first move in a chess game. She knew Bruce would paint her as unstable. It was why she had to be methodical, invisible. She had to let him destroy himself. He would overplay his hand, his arrogance, his greatest weakness. A sharp kick from within her belly brought her back to the present. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, her hand resting on the swell. "We're safe, and we're going to make things right." She wasn't just running anymore. She was gathering her strength, waiting for the right moment to release the evidence that would not just divorce her from Bruce Daly, but dismantle him entirely. 2 weeks into the search for Marie, Bruce Daly's carefully constructed world was beginning to fracture. The public narrative was holding. The billionaire husband, heartbroken and desperate for the return of his fragile, pregnant wife. He'd done a tearful interview on a national morning show, his performance so convincing that donations had poured into a foundation he'd set up for missing pregnant women. But behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting. Detective Rossi was a bulldog, quietly and relentlessly issuing subpoenas. She'd requested financial records from Daily Capital going back 10 years. Arthur Jennings had managed to slow the process down, burying them in paperwork. But it was a temporary dam against a coming flood. Bruce grew more and more erratic. He saw conspiracies everywhere. A valet who looked at him too long, a news reporter whose questions were a little too pointed. He snapped at his staff, his paranoia a toxic cloud that filled every room. The strain was showing on Chloe, too. They met in a sterile conference room, the city lights glittering below like a carpet of indifferent diamonds. "Rossi's team is looking into our acquisitions," she said, her voice tight. "Specifically, the ones connected to the Redwood Fund's timeline. They don't have a name for it yet, but they're connecting the dots." "They have nothing," Bruce insisted, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. His third of the meeting. "It's a fishing expedition. Fish get caught, Bruce," she shot back. "Your media tour is making you a folk hero, but it's also putting a giant magnifying glass on every aspect of your life. And ours is not built for scrutiny." He slammed the glass down, whiskey sloshing over the polished mahogany. "What do you want me to do, Chloe? It was your idea to go public. My idea was to control the story, not to turn you into Dr. Phil. You're overacting. People are going to start seeing through it." He paced the room, the alcohol doing nothing to soothe the frantic energy coursing through him. "I need to find her, before Rossi does. My PI is useless. He says she's a ghost. No digital footprint, no financial trail. It's like she never existed." "Marie was always more observant than you gave her credit for," Chloe said coolly. "You saw a painter. I saw a strategist." Her words infuriated him, because they were true. He had built his life on his ability to read people, to find their weaknesses and exploit them. But he had never bothered to truly read his own wife. That night, sleep offered no escape. He dreamt of his father. Not the powerful patriarch he remembered, but a pale, frightened man, his hand clutching his chest, his eyes full of accusation. Bruce woke up in a cold sweat, the silence of the mansion pressing in on him. He needed a win. Something to throw Rossi off the scent, to reassert his control. He powered on his laptop, his mind racing. If Marie was so smart, so calculating, then she would have covered her tracks. But maybe she'd left a decoy, a false trail. He hired a freelance cybersecurity expert, a grey hat hacker recommended by Arthur, to bypass the police and do a deep dive into their home network, looking for any fragments, any deleted files, anything the police might have missed. He told the hacker to look for communication between Marie and unknown parties, trying to build the case that she had been planning to leave, perhaps with someone else. 3 days later, the hacker called. "I found something," he said. A deleted email chain from a new, encrypted account she must have created. It's been wiped clean, but I was able to recover fragments from the server's cache. Bruce's heart leapt. "What does it say?" "It's not the full conversation, just bits and pieces. But the recipient is a man. Name's not there. They talk about a plan, about getting what we deserve. There's a line here. He'll never see it coming. His own arrogance will be his downfall. And this one, I can't wait to be with you, away from him. Looks like your wife wasn't just running, Mr. Daly. She was running to someone. A surge of white-hot rage, so potent it made him dizzy, coursed through Bruce. An affair. All this time, she was having an affair. The moral high ground she'd claimed in her letter, the righteous indignation, it was all a lie. She hadn't left because he was a monster. She'd left to be with another man, and they were planning to ruin him. This changed everything. This was the weapon he needed. Marie Bacon wasn't a victim. She was a vindictive, cheating wife, and he would use this to utterly destroy her. Bruce felt the intoxicating rush of power for the first time in weeks. He was no longer the victim of a mysterious disappearance. He was the wronged husband, betrayed and manipulated. He strode into Arthur Jennings's office like a king reclaiming his throne, the fragmented emails printed and held in his hand like a royal decree. "Here," he said, slapping the papers on Arthur's desk. "Here is your unstable, fragile woman. She was planning to leave me for another man. This whole thing, the letter, the Redwood Fund nonsense, it's a smokescreen. She and her lover are trying to set me up." Arthur read the pages, his expression shifting from skepticism to grim satisfaction. This is potent, Bruce. His own arrogance will be his downfall. A jury would see that as premeditation. "I want it leaked," Bruce ordered, anonymously. "Give it to that tabloid blogger who hates my guts. Let's see how the public feels about St. Marie now." It's a risky move, Arthur cautioned. It could look like you're trying to smear a missing woman. She smeared me first, Bruce roared. This is not a chess match anymore, Arthur. It's a bar fight, and I'm not losing. The leak worked faster and more effectively than he could have imagined. Within hours, the story had been picked up by mainstream news outlets. The narrative flipped on a dime. The public, once so sympathetic, now saw the story through a new lens. A scorned woman's elaborate, vengeful plot. The donations to the foundation slowed to a trickle. Comments online turned vicious, painting Marie as a gold-digging adulterer. Bruce felt a savage sense of victory. He had retaken the board. He agreed to another meeting with Detective Rossi, this time with a newfound swagger. He and Arthur presented the emails as devastating new evidence. Rossi read them, her face impassive. She looked up, not at Bruce, but at a point just over his shoulder. "Where did you get these, Mr. Daly?" "A private cybersecurity expert I hired," Bruce said smoothly. "He found what your team clearly missed." "I see," Rossi said, tapping the papers on the table. "It's very convenient." "Convenient," Arthur interjected. "It's the truth." "The truth is rarely this tidy, Mr. Jennings," Rossi said, her gaze finally locking onto Bruce. It was cold and utterly devoid of belief. "A perfectly preserved, partially deleted email chain that corroborates your exact narrative? A narrative you've been pushing since day one?" Bruce felt a prickle of unease. "What are you implying, Detective?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. My forensics team did a full sweep of your servers a week and a half ago. They are the best in the state. They found no trace of any such encrypted account or any deleted data fragments, which means these emails were either created and deleted in the last few days, or they were planted on a secondary, hidden partition for your expert to find." The room went silent. The air crackled with tension. "That's an outrageous accusation," Arthur stammered. "Is it?" Rossi leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intense register. "Because while you were busy playing the media, my team was following the money. We found the Redwood Fund, or at least its ghost, a series of shell corporations, all leading back to a single, unaudited holding company established by your father. We also found a pattern. Over a dozen tech firms, all bankrupted by aggressive short-selling and market manipulation, all bought for pennies on the dollar by Daily Capital. Bruce felt the blood drain from his face. "We spoke to the family of Marcus Thorne," Rossi continued, her voice relentless. "They thought his suicide was because he felt he'd failed them. They were very interested to hear our theory that he'd been deliberately targeted and ruined." She stood up, her presence filling the room. "You think these emails make Marie look bad? They don't. They make her look smart. She knew you'd look for something like this. She knew you'd try to paint her as an adulterer to discredit her. So she left you a breadcrumb. She planted a fake trail, knowing your ego wouldn't let you resist it. And you walked right into her trap." She paused at the door, turning back to face him. "You're not the victim here, Mr. Daly. You're a suspect, and your wife just outplayed you, miserably." The door clicked shut, leaving Bruce in a silence more profound and terrifying than the one he'd found in his empty house. The victory he had felt was ash in his mouth. Marie hadn't just run. She was directing this entire nightmare from some hidden stage, and he was the puppet dancing on her strings. The walls of the mansion had become a prison. Every shadow seemed to mock Bruce, every echo a whisper of Marie's name. Rossi's words. She planted a fake trail, replayed in his mind, a torturous loop. He had been so certain, so blinded by his own rage and arrogance, that he had never considered the possibility. He had been played. His nights were sleepless, fueled by whiskey and a gnawing dread. He wandered the silent halls, ending up, inevitably, outside the locked door of his father's study. The place he had avoided for 5 years now felt like the epicenter of his destruction. She found something in here. With trembling hands, he found the old brass key and opened the door. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of old paper, leather, and his father's lingering cigar smoke. Nothing had been touched. Books on market theory lined the walls. A half-empty glass of scotch sat on a coaster by the leather armchair, a fine layer of dust coating everything. It was a perfect time capsule of a man he had both worshipped and feared. He didn't know what he was looking for. He ran his hands over the bookshelves, pulled books out at random, leafed through their pages. Nothing. He went to the massive mahogany desk, the one his father had commanded like a general. He pulled open the drawers. Old pens, stationery, company reports from a decade ago. It was all mundane. Then he remembered the false bottom, a trick his father had shown him as a boy, a secret shared between them. His heart hammered as he reached under the bottom drawer and pressed a small, hidden latch. A section of the drawer's floor popped up. Inside were the ledgers, the real ones. He spent the next hour reading. The story of his family's fortune laid bare in his father's precise, brutal handwriting. The names of ruined men, the dates of their destruction, the profits reaped from their despair. It was worse than he'd imagined. He had known about the Redwood Fund's function, but he had never looked at the raw data, the human cost. He saw the entry for Marcus Thorne and felt a pang of something he couldn't name. But it was the last ledger that stopped his breath. It was thinner, its entries more sporadic, more personal. The handwriting grew shakier toward the end. And then he found it. The final entry, dated the day before his father's death. The SEC is sniffing around Thorne's collapse. Someone talked. Bruce is too reckless, too hungry. He's attracting attention. He doesn't understand the subtlety, the art of it. He thinks it's a war. It was always a hunt. If this comes out, we lose everything. The daily name will be synonymous with fraud. I can't let him destroy my legacy. There's only one way to cauterize the wound. He'll never see it coming. Bruce stared at the words, his mind refusing to process them. He'll never see it coming. The same words from the fake email Marie had planted. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. Beneath his father's entry was another, smaller piece of paper, tucked into the spine. It was a copy of the toxicology report, and beside it, a note in Marie's handwriting. He wasn't trying to protect his legacy from the SEC, Bruce. He was trying to protect it from you. He was going to cut you out, confess to a lesser charge, and blame the recent, more aggressive moves on his overzealous son. He was going to sacrifice you to save the family name. But you got to him first, didn't you? I found the records from the private pharmacy. Your prescription for cardiac medication filled 2 days before he died. The same drug that was in his system. He didn't have a heart attack. You killed him. You murdered your own father to protect a lie. This is what I couldn't live with. This is the poison. And this is what the world is about to learn. Bruce dropped the ledger. The room spun. He stumbled back, gasping for air, clutching his own chest. The memory, suppressed for 5 years, came rushing back with the force of a tidal wave. The argument in this very room. His father, cold and dismissive, telling him he was a liability. The fear, the panic, the rage at being seen as a failure by the one man whose approval he craved. The crushed pills in the bottom of the Scotch glass. He had told himself it was an accident, a mistake, that he'd just wanted to scare him, to slow him down. But as he stood in the dusty silence, the ghost of his father watching, he knew the truth. He was a murderer, and his wife, the quiet, gentle woman he thought he owned, knew it. She hadn't just found a corporate crime. She had unearthed the rotten soul of the Daly family and his own monstrous secret. The war wasn't about money or an affair. It was about justice. And he had already lost. The downfall of Bruce Daly was not a sudden explosion, but a controlled demolition, executed with surgical precision. Marie, from her sanctuary in Astoria, made her final move. Through a lawyer she'd hired in Portland, she created an anonymous, encrypted channel to two people, Detective Isabella Rossi and a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the Seattle Times. She sent them everything. The scanned pages from the ledgers, the details of the Redwood Fund, the names of the victimized companies, and the story of Marcus Thorne. And then she sent the two most damning pieces of evidence: the copy of Richard Daly's toxicology report and the pharmacy records showing Bruce's prescription. She didn't offer commentary or accusation, just the cold, hard facts. She let the evidence speak for itself. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. The headline on the front page of the Seattle Times was stark: Daly Capital, an empire built on fraud. Founder's death questioned. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, weaving together the financial crimes with the deeply personal tragedy of the families the Redwood Fund had destroyed. It laid out the timeline of Richard Daly's death, the toxicology report, and Bruce's conveniently timed prescription, stopping just short of an outright accusation of murder, but leaving the reader with no other possible conclusion. Simultaneously, Detective Rossi, now armed with undeniable evidence, moved in. She didn't go to the mansion. She went to the Daly Capitol building downtown, arriving with a team of officers and a warrant to seize every server, every file, every piece of paper in the building. They walked into the lobby at 9:00 a.m., just as the morning rush was settling. The arrest was quiet and brutally efficient. They found Bruce Daly in his top-floor office, staring out the window at the city that had once been his kingdom. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He didn't resist. He didn't even seem surprised. When Rossi put the handcuffs on him, he simply looked at her, his eyes hollow. "Tell me," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "Was it the business fraud or my father?" "We'll start with the fraud," Rossi replied, her voice giving nothing away. "And we'll see where the evidence takes us from there. You have the right to remain silent." Chloe Vance was taken into custody an hour later, attempting to leave her condo with a suitcase and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. Her composure finally shattered. She started talking the moment she was in the interrogation room, trying to negotiate a deal, offering up Bruce to save herself. The news spread like wildfire. Bruce Daly, the charismatic billionaire, the grieving husband, was now a pariah. His face was plastered across every news channel, no longer with a tearful plea, but in a grim-faced mugshot. The story of his wife's disappearance was retold, not as a tragedy, but as the escape of a heroic whistleblower. In Astoria, Marie watched it all unfold on the small television in her cottage. She felt no triumph, no surge of victory, only a profound, aching sadness for the man he could have been, for the life they might have had. But as she placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady kick of her child, she also felt a quiet, steely resolve. She had not done this for revenge. She had done it for this new life. She had broken the cycle of poison. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but she knew who it was. She answered. "Hello, Marie," said the calm, professional voice of Detective Rossi. "Detective?" Marie replied, her own voice steady. "We have him in custody, him and Chloe Vance. The SEC has frozen all of Daly Capital's assets. It's over." There was a pause. "Your evidence was impeccable. You did the right thing." "Thank you," Marie whispered. "There's just one more thing," Rossi said gently. You and the baby are safe now. It's time to come home. Whenever you're ready." Marie looked out the window at the vast, open sea. Home. The word felt strange. Her old home was gone, but for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she might be able to build a new one. Months passed. The legal battle against Bruce Daly was a slow, grinding machine. Faced with overwhelming evidence of financial fraud, securities violations, and a mountain of civil lawsuits from the families he'd ruined, his empire was liquidated. His name, once a symbol of success, was now a mark of shame. The murder investigation into his father's death was ongoing, the district attorney methodically building a case so airtight it could withstand any appeal. Marie had given birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Lily after her mother. She had moved to a quiet suburb outside Portland, using a small inheritance from her parents to buy a modest house with a small garden. Her life was simple, ordered, and peaceful. The fear was gone, replaced by the demanding, all-consuming love for her daughter. She had cooperated fully with the authorities, giving her testimony in a series of depositions from her lawyer's office. She never had to see Bruce. Her evidence was the star witness. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the return address that of the Federal Detention Center, where Bruce was being held pending trial. Her first instinct was to burn it. But, for Lily's sake, she knew she had to read it. She had to close the final chapter. She waited until Lily was asleep, then sat in her quiet living room, the letter in her hands. "Marie, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. There are no words to explain what I did, only the monstrous truth of it. The lies I built my life on became the only thing I knew how to protect. My father taught me that winning was the only thing that mattered. He taught me to see people as assets or liabilities. When he decided I was a liability, I did what he taught me to do. I eliminated the threat. I became him. And then I tried to turn you into a beautiful asset. And when you became a threat, I tried to eliminate you, too. In the silence of this cell, there is nothing left but the echo of my own choices. I see what I destroyed. Not just the lives in those ledgers, but yours, mine, and our child's. A child I will never know. I know you did this to protect her. And for that, in the one clean part of my soul that is left, I am grateful. You saved her from me. You were always stronger than I ever knew. They are offering me a plea deal. Decades in prison for the financial crimes, and they will drop the murder investigation to a lesser charge. My lawyer says I should take it. I think he's right. It's time for the lies to end. Be happy, Marie. Give our daughter a good life. Tell her nothing about me. Bruce. Marie folded the letter, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a confession, an admission of a hollow man finally forced to look at his own reflection. There was no redemption in it for him, but for her, it was a release. It was the final echo of a life she had survived. She walked into Lily's nursery and looked down at her sleeping daughter, her tiny chest rising and falling in the soft light of the moon. She was a new beginning, a legacy of strength, not of sin. Marie knew then that she wouldn't tell Lily nothing of her father. One day, when she was old enough, she would tell her the truth, a hard, complicated story about a man who lost his way and a mother who found hers. 1 year later, Marie Bacon stood before a small crowd, dedicating the opening of the Thorn Foundation, an advocacy center for victims of corporate fraud, funded by the court-awarded restitution from the Daly capital case. With Lily on her hip, she was no longer a fugitive or a victim. She was a survivor who had turned her pain into purpose. She had faced the darkest parts of a man's soul and had emerged not broken, but forged in the fire. Her victory wasn't in his downfall, but in the quiet, meaningful life she had built from the ashes, proving that the most powerful empires are not built on money or fear, but on resilience, truth, and the enduring strength to fight for a new beginning. If this story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate justice resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story of strength, and subscribe for more true-to-life emotional dramas.